there's nothing confirmed about Laylat al-Isra, nothing. And that's why we don't, there's no ibadah that is specific to these nights in the Sunnah. That's true. And if people say there is, it becomes a bid'ah. That is a bid'ah, to introduce things that aren't from the religion into the religion. So, but having said that, the ulama do take a blessing from the 27th of Rajab generally. I mean, a lot of the ulama say it's a good night because the majority of ulama do think that it is the night of the Isra, but Imam Nawawi did not. So even to say by kashf or something that it's this night, I don't think. Imam Nawawi was one of the great awliya of our tradition, but he did not agree with that opinion. There's nothing confirmed, but generally it is the night. If you look on Muslim calendars, it's the night that they put for the night of the Isra. And so it's a good night to remember the Isra, just generally. The Prophet ﷺ, if you look at what happened right before the Isra, was probably the most difficult time of the Prophet's life, ﷺ. You know, they say that the darkest hour is the one right before dawn. The Prophet ﷺ had gone to Ta'if, and he had been rejected by the people of Ta'if. But worse than that, they really humiliated him. I mean, you can't humiliate in reality dignified people. You know, it's not. But they attempted to humiliate him, because humiliation is really an internal experience more than, I mean, somebody can denigrate you. But humiliation is something you experience. I was so humiliated. You know, people, that's what they say. You know, so when you say he humiliated me, it's really, you're saying I allowed myself to be humiliated by him. Because people can't really humiliate you. They can be disrespectful, but it says more about them than it does about you in reality. So you can allow yourself to be humiliated. Now the Prophet ﷺ also said, "Al-mu'minu la yudhillu nafsah." A believer shouldn't ever humiliate himself. And what Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said, that it meant opposing government, you know, like rebels and things like that. I mean, that's how he interpreted it, because he said when you do that and then they capture you and they put you in shackles and they do all, you've become humiliated. But what Ahmed Zarruq, the Prophet said, "Al-mu'minu la yudhillu nafsahu." The believer doesn't humiliate himself, which really means that it's you that's humiliating yourself. It's not somebody else. It's you that's doing it. But you can cause yourself to be humiliated by doing stupid things. So what the Prophet ﷺ was doing was the most honorable of things. There was nothing dishonorable about it, and there was nothing that should have warranted what happened to him. Whereas when you go against a government, for instance, and oppose them, you've basically done something that justifies their response, because that's how they're going to respond. They're going to respond by humiliating you. So in essence, you've humiliated yourself by putting yourself into a position like that. So when the Prophet ﷺ went to Ta'if, he was basically looking for people to give him protection so that he could do his da'wah, and they didn't respond. But worse than that, they sent the servants out to throw rocks at him. Some of the children threw rocks at him, and he actually had, you know, his feet were bloodied from that, and he was very distressed about it, because it was like his last hila. It was his last strategy. He was doing the asbab. Even though his trust was completely with Allah, he was doing the asbab. And that's why his dua is so interesting, because, well, there's two things that are interesting. One is who comes to him at that time when he goes to he's sitting under the tree. Who comes to him? The Christian man, Addas, and Nanawi. And where was he from? Because he asked him, where are you from? What did he say? He said he was from Nineveh. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that's the city of the blessed man, Yunus ibn Metta. Now what's interesting about that, because this is, these are the things that God plans. I mean, what's interesting about that story? I mean, what would be interesting about a man from Nineveh coming to the Prophet ﷺ at that point? Because what's the story of Nineveh? What's the story of Nineveh? It's interesting because they disbelieved in him, but he gets fed up. See, Jonah basically writes them off and says, these people, there's no real hope for them. And he goes, and then he gets on the ship, and then there's a storm, and they throw lots, and they throw him over. And then the whale comes. But the point of that story is that he was in the same situation. The Prophet was in the situation of Yunus ibn Metta. Now what happens with Yunus in the belly? He's like, his realization is, this is all from God. I had my plan, but God had his plan. Because he was trying to get on the boat and but it didn't work out the way he thought in his mind it was going to work out, and he ends up in the belly of the whale and praising God, right? Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Now who does he blame? Does he blame the people of Nineveh? He's in the belly of the whale. Oh Allah, look what they've done to me. Destroy these people, right? I mean, does he do that? Does he blame the people? What's he say? He blames himself. It's so interesting. It's like Muslims tend to, I don't know what happened, but at a certain point they stopped reading these stories correctly or something. But he blames himself, and he says, if you don't help me, I'm finished. So the fact that a man from the city of Nineveh comes to the Prophet at that time is very symbolic. And the Prophet ﷺ says his famous dua, where he says to Allah, you are the Lord of the oppressed. And he said, I don't have any strategy, قَلَّتْ حِيلَتِي. I don't really have a strategy to do it. I've tried everything that I can. But then he says, I don't know who you're going to send me to. Is it an enemy that will treat me horribly? Or some stranger that doesn't know who I am? There's no warmth, there's no help coming from them. إِلَى مَنْ تَكِلُونِي. But then he says, but if you're pleased with me, if you're pleased with me, then I don't care what you do to me, as long as you're pleased with me. In other words, whatever the circumstances you put me in, I'm not going to complain about them, as long as you're. And then he said, وَالْعَافِيَةُ أَوْسَعُ. The well-being is easier for me. It's easier to be in a situation where you're not in that constriction and difficulties. But what's interesting about that is he said, that I ashku ilayka hawani ala nas. I complain to you my insignificance in the eyes of the people. He didn't complain about how they treated him. He complained about the fact that he didn't hawani ala nas, that I'm in this situation where they're not respecting me.